In advance of what might be coming within a few weeks, within a month, the Supreme Court on Roe v. Wade, the right wing strike back against reproductive rights, that war continues on the ground. Apparently, an abortion clinic that was set to open next month in Wyoming was damaged by fire early yesterday. And police believe that it was a case of arson, that it was deliberately set. The story is still developing, but we're gonna go with what we know from the initial reporting. So according to the AP, the clinic was gonna provide other healthcare services as well as abortion services. Had been set to open in June as only the second place in the entire state to offer abortions. The current lone location is at a hospital in Jackson, 281 miles away. And apparently in relation to this particular attack, a person who called authorities before dawn saw someone running from the building with what appeared to be a gas can and a black bag. Investigators were reviewing video footage from the area in hopes of identifying the subject or generating some sort of suspect description. No injuries were reported, and I haven't found a very clear idea of how damaged the clinic was. It is possible it was superficial. I don't know if this is, at this point, if this is going to delay the actual opening. But this is sort of what we've been warning. Like we like coming out of the conversation about the leak back on May 3rd about Roe v. Wade, the right lost their mind about how the pro-abortion left was gonna get violent. And we reminded people that is not typically how this has played out on the ground. This is what has been going on. We're gonna get to the stats in a little bit, Brett, but what do you think?
Law-abiding citizens would use that facility. Law-abiding citizens. And these folks who advocate for the overturning of Roe versus Wade, I'm fine with people using political discourse to try to change things. But if you support this kind of action, you are against the rule of law. This is insane. I mean, when you hear like, you should suspect arson in a situation like this when something like that happens, and then you hear somebody say, "I saw someone run away with a gas can." But either way, you don't need to
then
just
it
have
seems
this.
Like it might be arson,
maybe a little arsony. But maybe there's a long history of violence perpetrated by people on the right in this crazy crusade to create less freedom in America, because they're obsessed with being in charge of other people's bodies. That's what they want. I'm on the left. I advocate for more freedom than people on the right. And when I say that, I want people to have freedom to do what they want with their bodies when it comes down to how they should make medical decisions for their own bodies in accordance with the law, which is on my side, as well as any other number of things like how they should behave sexually. I would like to leave it up to them, as opposed to this weird perv kink that people on the right have, where they want you to run it by them first to see if it's okay with their Jesus. If you touch someone's hoo-ha, the only person you should check with to see if it's okay to touch their hoo-ha is the person whose hoo-ha you want to touch.
Rules to live by. I do agree. Yes, and I want to, like you've pointed out, the gap between their stated positions in regards to things like freedom and what they actually advocate for. Well, let's point out the gap between what they call themselves, the pro-life movement, and what they've done in practice. So they murdered 11 people: doctors, clinic employees, a clinic escort, a security guard, a police officer. This is between 1993 and 2016. There were 26 other attempted murders. So they were so pro-life that they were willing to kill dozens of people, including cops, along the way. That's how pro-life they actually were. Also, between 1977 and 2015, they directed more than 7,200 reported acts of violence at abortion providers, 42 bombings, 185 arson attacks, thousands of death threats, bioterrorism threats, and assaults, hundreds of thousands of acts of disruption, which can be other bomb threats, harassing calls, all of this. It was just an organized and disorganized at the same time campaign of terror over literally decades against people who were simply following their constitutional rights. That is what this movement actually was. I'm being reminded by my producer that the bombing at the Atlanta Olympics was also conducted by an anti-abortion terrorist. That is what we were invoking when saying the idea that protesting outside of Alito's house is an act of violence. In the context of what we're talking about, that you think we're the violent side, though you guys were literally, Bill O'Reilly spent years trying to whip the movement into a frenzy and ended up, he was around the subject of a doctor who got murdered. I'll say that.
The left is so against violence that some people think that like insults on the left think insults are an act of violence. Like non-hate speech insults are an act of violence. Like no, the left is pretty allergic to violence. The right is the one who is like, well, more guns, please, and let's go bomb an abortion clinic.
Yep. Yeah, Anna and I had the argument on the show yesterday when she was calling Ted Cruz ugly. We so don't like violence.
He's not ugly in the blobfish community. If you are a cis hetero female blobfish, you would love him to spray a whole cloud of goo over your egg sac. But in the human community, he looks like a blobfish.
This was an act of harassment that you just witnessed on Twitch or YouTube.
Check out the Damage Report podcast each day, wherever you get your podcasts, whether Pocket Casts or Stitcher or iTunes. You can join me as I give you the news and stories you want, with a range of co-hosts and interview guests jumping in on the fun each day. Again, that's the Damage Report, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you get them at iTunes, don't forget to rate and review. Sometimes I'll read them live on the show.